People have different kind of ugly qualities.
Selfishness.
Okay, so you think selfishness is the ugliest one. I think there's uglier than selfish, because I think you're also selfish. I think I'm also selfish. I think our kids are selfish. But there is a definition of selfish. Apathy or grief, guilt, and those are the lowest level. And then there's desire, there's anger, and anger is the highest of the worst level. People have different kind of ugly qualities.
Selfishness.
Okay, so you think selfishness is the ugliest one. I think there's uglier than selfish, because I think you're also selfish. I think I'm also selfish. I think our kids are selfish. But there is a definition of selfish, right? What else would you say is the ugliest?
I don't know what they call it.
Let me rephrase it. How about unattractive? Where you're like, oh, that energy is just very unattractive.
Yeah.
What would you say it is?
I really get rubbed the wrong way by like heavy arrogance, like when someone comes around and talks about themselves as if they are like bigger than everyone else.
So I will say, for me, unattractive is helpless, very unattractive. I once read a book called Power versus Force. And I read this book 20 years ago, and it talks about the different levels of consciousness, okay? From the lowest to the highest. So level of consciousness, Power versus Force. I read this book 20 years ago, and he explains the different levels from the lowest level to the highest ones. The lowest level of consciousness I think he talks about is apathy or grief, guilt, and those are the lowest level. And then there's desire, there's anger, and anger is the highest of the worst level, meaning like it's actually better than grief, apathy, all of that. Courage is, I have the courage to fail. You have the courage to start a podcast with 250,000 of subscribers and somebody comments and says, David, you suck. So you understand how hard life is? That's a risk you're taking. When you make a video, some people come after you. You're not going to get 100% positive comments, but you have the courage to say, look, at least I'm creating something. You know, people have to just realize and identify for themselves what qualities are ugly. So if I'm talking victimhood language always, but you don't understand how I grew up, oh my God, I can guarantee you there's millions of stories of people that had a harder life than you that would exchange their problems with you. For me, I grew up in a family where my mother's side, they were communists, my dad's side were imperialists, and my mother's side, they always blamed and they always were like, but no, we're never gonna be rich. Like I remember one time I was 14 years old.
Real quick, imperialist,
communist.
Can you explain those?
Yes, imperialism is like, UK, where there's a king, there's a queen. Right. Iran, there was an imperialism. And my mother was more, because they escaped from Russia, her family did, so they read Communist Manifesto. So they believe rich people are bad people. They believe rich people are greedy. And I had an uncle, his name was Luther Al-Khasse, who just passed away a couple of years ago. I always thought this was a bad guy. And I'm like, man, I'm like, why is this guy such a bad guy? If he's such a bad guy, why is every time I go on Sunday, 50, 60 people there and they're all laughing, having a good time? He's cooking for people and he was successful, he was this, he was that. Do you know when people bring stuff for you for Thanksgiving? They bring it once, thank you, because you're poor. They bring it twice. By the third time, I don't want you to feel sorry for me. It's an unattractive quality. I don't want you to look, the look when somebody looks at you with the feeling sorry look? I don't like that look. I don't think people should like that look. I think maybe a little bit for a season that you're going through tough times. But if it's every year, now you're feeding into it. Now you're believing it. Now your kids are starting to believe maybe we are victims. We're not victims.